This is the Failures Only podcast.
This is the Failures Only podcast.
This is the Failures Only podcast,
where we are embracing the power of failure
by redefining it
and turning your worst moments
into your sources of strength.
Did we go through everything we went through in this country for you to now decide to be mediocre? If not me, who? If not now, when?
Welcome to the Failures Only podcast. Failure is a part of the human condition. We are all a part of this club that we did not know exists, but yet we're part of it, right? And it's called Failures Only. We are flipping the script on success and redefining failure. Today we have an amazing guest, Catalina Cruz, the New York State Assemblywoman from District 39. And I want to introduce my co-host, Carlos Martinez. Take us to the show, Carlos.
Today, we're going to be talking about feeling comfortable with feeling uncomfortable, right? And today, obviously, we have the great Catalina Cruz, Assemblywoman for the 39th District, first dreamer, right, to serve an elected position in the New York State Legislature, right? And I was completely blown away by this stat. The third dreamer to hold an elected position in the United States.
Woo.
I thought that was...
Can we get a round of applause for that?
I thought that was the most amazing thing.
Yeah.
Right? Because, I mean, listen, when we spoke to you yesterday in our pre-production meeting, your energy, everything that we briefly spoke about, I thought that I couldn't wait to talk to you and talk about everything that you've been through, because I know you got some stories.
Yeah. And for those that don't know in the audience, dreamers are undocumented immigrants who have arrived in the United States as children, lived and attended school here, and they identify as Americans, right? So we are going to have the premier dreamer in the United States.
Premier.
On the show.
Premier.
Carlos, let's do this.
Well, Catalina, I mean, let's jump right into it, right? Obviously, being a dreamer, you know, coming here when you were 8, 9 years old, I believe, right? I kind of share that same experience. I know how tough it is having siblings and being raised by a single mom, right? I believe. Could you share an experience where you've gone through, or anything that you can share where you've experienced, you know, that discomfort, right? And in facing that discomfort has essentially gotten you to that other side?
Well, first, thank you for having me, and congratulations on your show. I think the idea of flipping the script on something that for many of us becomes almost anxiety inducing, which is not getting what you want or failing at something, right. And just turning it into an opportunity to have a conversation about what success actually takes is not something we ever really sit down and do, other than with a bottle of drinks with our friends. Aguardiente. You know, growing up the way that I did, I think there's many examples of that I can give you. One of the main ones, I think, is when I decided to go to college. You know, I had been working, I want to say since I was about 14 years old, to try to help my mom supplement our income. It comes time for me to go to college, and I'm undocumented at this point. There was no DREAM Act. The federal government was still fighting it out. Mm-hmm. There wasn't even, I think, a thought at the state level to do anything around tuition. And so I had to make this decision of, what am I going to do? I'd applied to Albany. I got in, and I couldn't afford it. Yeah. And I started to think about, what do I want my life to look like? And how am I going to get there? And I had this thought and dream that by the time I graduate college, the DREAM Act will be in place, and I'm no longer going to have to worry about anything, because I'll have an education and I'll have papers. That didn't quite happen that way. But I made a decision to go to CUNY, and more specifically, John Jay. And I wanted to go to John Jay because I had this other thought that when I graduated, I was going to go be the next Olivia Benson and join the NYPD and support survivors. And this is what I'm going to do. And as I'm getting closer to graduation and nothing in the federal government just moving, it became pretty clear that I was going to be undocumented for a while. And I still graduated, went on to law school, and was able to get, you know, status a different way. But the path that took me there was not the one I had envisioned at first.
Yeah.
And what was that moment where you realized that this was not going to happen? Like, what was that like? Because obviously for someone that has, at this point being undocumented, you've had this plan for the next few years, and then you come to that point, and now that plan is essentially gone.
It's my last year of undergrad, and it's pretty clear that it's not going to happen. And I bump into, and let me actually backtrack for a minute, because me realizing that it wasn't going to happen wasn't some sort of aha moment.
Yeah.
It was like a series of things that happened that made me realize that even if it happened, I no longer wanted that. Because I had found a bigger path to help other people and people like me.
Yeah.
I met this amazing attorney, Ernest. I had worked in a private law office as a receptionist, off the books, of course, for a little while. Ernest happened to be an attorney that would come in and out. He strikes up a conversation with me, realizes my status, and he says, "I'll do your case pro bono. I'll figure out things pro bono." And I was like, I know. Wow. And he guided me all the way through citizenship. And I said, that's what I need to do.
Yeah.
Because he changed my life.
Ooh, I got chills.
Oh, yeah.
Thinking about that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That moment. Yeah.
Ernest, he's still practicing out in the world somewhere. Yeah. But Ernest changed my life, my family's life in Colombia, my family's life here, because he helped me get status. And that then led me to be able to petition for my mom so that my mom could get out of the shadows. And I was like, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to law school and I'm going to help other people.
And it was at that moment that you said, I see plan A, plan B is really what I was meant to do.
Oh, yeah. Wait till you get to plan C.
and what's interesting, too, what you were mentioning here is that, and I have some friends that were in a similar situation, you're not paying, when you go to college, you're not paying in-state tuition. You're paying out-of-state tuition.
Yes. There was, at the time that I went, CUNY in its infinite wisdom made a decision to force undocumented kids to pay out-of-state tuition.
Right.
The students
even though you could be living in New York
That's right.
since you were 3.
I will say the students rebelled.
Yeah.
And this is when, movements actually create change. The students rebelled. They protested. Out of that came CUNY Dreamers. And that changed. They reverted us to in-state tuition, and I was able to pay in-state tuition. But there was a moment there that it was pretty dark. And pause in how serendipity works sometimes. Years later, one of the creators of CUNY Dreamers was my campaign manager that helped me win. Wow. You just never know.
So see, that's the path. I'm doing this, right? But you had a kind of step that knocked you off the path.
Right.
But it's really the path that you want.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of people don't always talk about this, but I might not be the kind of religious person that goes to church every Sunday, but I am a firm believer in that God has paths that you can't even begin to imagine. Yeah. And there's a reason why everything has happened for me the way that it has. So I embrace it and I go with it and I fight for it.
And that, I think you hit the nail right on the head, right? Embracing it, because that's essentially, tying it all into that, looking at this maybe plan A and seeing it, literally crumble right before you, right? But then embracing the other path, right? Because, it's like the old saying goes, right? How does the saying go? It says basically.
I know you said the old saying. I don't want to tell us what it is.
I'm thinking because she's saying about God. Hold on. The saying goes, you want to make God laugh, tell him your plan.
Oh, I've never heard of that, but that's awesome.
Oh, yeah. In Spanish, we say,
maybe that's why I never heard it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you just never know.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, within that, right? So now you are at a point where you say, okay, let's embrace this new me, right? Now we fast forward to what happens at that point where essentially you make that decision to be the person that you are today, the Assemblywoman for one of the most diverse districts.
That didn't happen right away. I went on to go to law school, and I had a vision that I was going to be a private practitioner, just like Ernest was. I was going to represent people. But, Then the economic downturn happened.
Yeah.
There were no jobs.
Right.
And I get put, this is what I mean by the path that you never know and the path that God has created.
Right.
Because all of you know who Justice Jenna Rivera is.
Yeah.
Back then I knew her as Professor Jenna Rivera.
Oh.
I was interning at actually, that's how I got my internship, through her. I was the president of the Latino Students Association. There's going to be an award given by the then Attorney General Cuomo to a Latino student. She recommends me. The economic downturn happens. The event gets canceled, and my resume starts floating around the desk, and it lands on the desk of the person who basically became the person who jump-started my career, Elizabeth De Leon, who is the woman that I learned how to be a Latina lawyer from.
Yeah.
And she hires me. Out of nowhere, I get a call. I had never applied for the job.
Wow.
You guys went to law school. You know how amazing it is to have a paid internship?
Oh.
Yeah.
I get a call for a paid internship at the Attorney General's office. I don't know who this woman is. I go for the intern. I was like, paid internship? I was hired to do housing. I was like, amazing, I'll do it.
Right.
I end up doing the biggest immigration services fraud case in the city in a very long time. And I end up having to go to legal services because they weren't hiring. I got turned down twice for a job at the Attorney General's office.
Right.
That is what I want to do. I was like, I'm going to go be an assistant attorney general. I get turned down. And as luck would have it, I end up following Elizabeth in her career. So she would go to the city council. She'd take me with her. She'd go to the governor's office. She'd take me with her. And I worked on and off for her and the former governor for 10 years.
Right.
And I have a midlife career crisis. Wow. Mm-hmm. When I realized that the former governor was not as immigrant friendly as people painted him to be.
Right.
And I said, am I allowed to curse on this thing?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I said, fuck this.
Right.
I am leaving. And I went to go work for Julissa Ferreras, who was a council member.
Right.
And from her, I learned how to be a good elected official that really cares about the community, that puts people first.
Yeah.
And I go be her chief of staff. My gut told me she doesn't want to do this job anymore. But I knew that if I took that job, even if it was for a year, I was going to open doors I could never think of. Yeah. She ends up telling me 3 months later, I'm leaving office. And I work for her for a year. I get her through her exit. And one of her colleagues who was my council member says, I want you to run for office.
Wow.
I got asked 4 times to run for this seat by the wrong people.
Right.
Then he asked me. And it's a very different thing when you get asked to do something because you know that the support is going to be there. Yeah. And that's how I landed where I'm at, but not before talking to my mother.
Of course. Right, of course.
The day he asked me to run, he says I have 48 hours to make the decision, because if not, he had to find somebody else he was going to support, because there was like a reshifting of seats and politics. When I go to my mother, and I remember this moment very specifically, my mom, and we all come from Latino moms, and the way that they can talk to you versus the way that they talk to total strangers, very different. Yeah. With you, it's more like a brutal.
Yeah, very true.
Oh, yes.
It's a knife to the face.
Exactly, exactly.
I've had a lot of it.
And while I met your mother, and she's very nice, I'm sure that is exactly like
5'1".
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
In the 90s. Yeah, she needed to be.
Right in the throat.
Oh, yeah. She's surgical.
I go to my mom's house. We're in her kitchen. I'm sitting on a bar stool. She's washing the dishes. And I say to her, Mommy, Danny wants me to run. And I don't know what to do. And she stops washing. She turns at me and she goes, did we go through everything we went through in this country for you to now decide to be mediocre?
There it is.
And I was just like,
that was like a literal slap in the face.
And she said, you should be telling me this is what I'm going to do. And here's what I need you to do to help me. I said, Mom, our story is going to come out. I need you to be okay with this. This is why we're talking. She's like, we'll figure it out. You're going to do this. And I was like, okay, we're doing this.
God bless Mom.
Yeah,
hold up.
Mom. I mean, shout out to all the moms. Shout out to all the moms.
Shout out to all the moms.
I want to drop a stat in there because I'm like the fact checker.
Stat guru.
Say, right? Stat guru, fact checker. For those of you in the audience that don't know, less than 6% of Latinos in the United States are attorneys. Less than 2% are Latinas.
Now, Pablo, how many Latina lawyers are in the state legislature?
That I don't have.
Can I take a guess? Less than 2%?
My stat guru.
1.
Ooh, I was close.
That's me.
Yeah, wow.
I'm the only
right.
Latina lawyer in the
Wow.
state legislature.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
Good
another
for you.
stat that I didn't look at.
There you go. There you go.
Failures only. See what happened? Yeah.
But you know what? You said something that kind of just I have to ask this. What was your biggest concern about your family story that you were afraid to come out? In the sense of, was it because you were undocumented at that point? Was that your biggest fear?
So at that point, I was already a citizen. My
Right.
mom was a permanent resident, but we are very private people.
Yeah.
My mom, no one outside of our household, except maybe one or two of my childhood friends, knew about our status.
Right.
And of course, the other family who was also undocumented. But it meant I was going to have to talk about a lot of things that I could give my face to. But I am now a public figure, and what happens when they bring my mom into it, and when they bring my life into it, and back then I was married to a police officer. My ex-husband was very private, and so I had a lot of things to think through. In now my life is going to be out in the open, and there's something called opposition research that my opponent I knew would take some of that, and how is it going to be used against us? So I needed to shield and protect my family. I really wasn't concerned about myself. I remember once someone saying to me, "You're running against a sitting elected and against the political party. Yeah, what if they destroy your career?" And I said, "I grew up undocumented." I was like, "What are you going to do to me that hasn't already been done?"
Right.
I could put up a shingle and do my own thing. I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about my family and what that means. And my mom is a natural. She talks to the camera. She's been interviewed. She's fine.
They do requests for interviews for her.
Oh yeah, I've had that. And so now we're in a good place. But in that beginning, it was tough deciding because I felt a sense of responsibility to do it.
Yeah.
It was after the Trump election. I knew politically the kind of hit that Dreamers were taking. And, as a former Dreamer, for me, it felt like, if not me, who? If not now, when? And so I was like, screw it. The worst thing that could happen is I give a different face to what Dreamers are supposed to be like. I lose and we keep it moving. I go back to my career and make money. But I won. So
that kind of goes with the saying that we always say, "Fuck it, if it fails, it fails." And that's what we do in the
usually
show.
how we end the show.
That's usually how we end the
Fuck
show.
it, if it fails, it fails.
It fails. Yeah, whatever. Yeah. Right. See? So it works. It works. On that, I guess, like on that path, right? Like, what were the moments of doubt? How did you deal with those moments of doubt when they popped up? Like, who did you go to? Did you go and have like the more serious conversation? Did mom slap you around and say, despiértate? Like she already did it to you, right? Yeah. Like, how did you roll through those? Because I'm sure a million moments of doubt popped up in that journey to make those decisions.
So I had a fantastic support system.
Right.
I had my consultants. I had my friends. I had my mom. It was more. I try to almost shield her from those bad moments. Yeah. I remember specifically my opponent was not the kindest. I ran a positive campaign. They ran a negative campaign, a smear campaign. At some point, they made up a nickname of Corporate Catalina, and I was like, guys,
come on, really?
Like I'm the least corporate person.
Really?
Like
I remember an ad.
I get my sandwiches from bodegas. Like, what are you talking about right now?
I remember an ad that said that I was against a bill to support the rights of immigrant workers. I was like, whoa, you're calling me anti-immigrant? That's a new one. And, and my mom took a lot of that to heart. And so I would shield her from going to ask for advice. It was more like, Mom, can you go to this? Can you support me at this? At one debate, she tried to go get on the line to ask questions. And she was going to ask my opponent, why are you so mean to my daughter? My mom, we're not doing that. We can't.
That's a Latina mom
and
to the core.
So she got shielded by, yes, basically. But I created a kitchen cabinet of people who I would go to when I needed emotional support versus when I needed support on the politics and on framing this and on framing that. And my campaign manager, I came to her almost as a fluke. I needed someone to run petitions, to collect the petitions. That's the process to get on the ballot.
Yeah.
And I didn't really know anyone, and she knew how to do it. But she was very weary of me and of the idea that I would be using our dreamer narrative for political gain. And so she didn't trust me at first. And frankly, I didn't trust her because I didn't know her. And when we went through that process of getting those signatures, which meant door knocking, getting up at 5 a.m, going to sleep at 10 o'clock at night, if you actually went to sleep at 10 o'clock at night, it bonded us. And to me, I couldn't figure out anyone else other than her to kind of guide me through those moments. And so when I would get really nervous, we had a signal. If I was going to speak and there was something that was making me nervous, she would be on the audience and she would do this, which meant talk from the heart. I am terrible at talking points. If you give me a speech, I'm going to screw it up.
Right.
But if you tell me, here's the 3 things that you need to hit, everything else, say it from the heart, I'm going to land it. Yeah. And she's the one that taught me that. She actually told my consultants, stop giving her speeches. Tell her the 3 things you need her to land. And that's it. She's better from the heart. And so she'll be in the audience, and she was the person I would go to when things were falling apart. I didn't even have to tell her that at that point, my marriage was falling apart. Like, she would see it and she's like, yeah, we can't have her there with him. Here's what and she would do this. We're leaving. Here's how you need to speak. Yeah. It's time to go. So that was her signal. And so she was the person that kept me sane, that fought everybody. People hated her. And she was like, I'm not here to be their friend.
Good cop, bad cop?
Oh, yeah. Not even. Because she was so strict. And and her role was
to protect you.
To protect me and to get me to win. And to this day, we're still friends. And I'm her emergency contact.
Yeah.
I have her GPS, her tracker on my phone. Like, she's actually out playing golf with my partner right now because, like, we became family.
Yeah.
And so that's how I was able to get through the tough times, the moments of doubt, the moments of I'm not good enough, the moments of can I do this? It was through that network and through that young woman, because she's still undocumented. Yeah. She's still the person that I was 30 years ago. And I did this for people like her. And so it just reminds me of, this is why you're doing it. This is why you're doing it.
Right.
And that speaks to, like, having that inner circle of trust, right? And it sounds cliche, it sounds corny, but it's the truth.
Oh,
I mean, especially, like, I just turned 41, right? And I can honestly say within the past 5 years, I've lost most of the friends that I've known since, like, early 20s, late 20s, they're gone. But the handful of people that are around my life now, it's such a much more valuable relationship. I can trust them. Like, I'm here with these fools doing this podcast on national,
that's us,
all over making fun of each other, right? And it's like, but as you kind of, like, step up the ladder of success, you realize that's way more important than having 20 people that are not going to pick up the phone when you need them to pick up the phone.
Try running for office. That'll really weed out who's your real friends, who's your friends because of politics.
Right. Yeah.
Who are your friends because they're expecting something from you, and who are the ones that stick around. Robin, who's my chief, I met her on the very first day of law school.
Yeah.
Very first day of law school, we walk in and we remain friends. But when I decided to run for office, someone who was supposed to do something very specific on my campaign messed up and didn't do it. And so I called her for help. And when it came time to figure out who was going to be my chief of staff, who's the person who basically has to watch your back, your front, and your side, it was my former campaign manager who said, it has to be her.
Wow.
She's like, she's going to protect you the way I protect you. Yeah. And she's now been my chief of staff since the first day, 6 years. Yeah. And I wouldn't trade her for the world.
Wow. That's we got a similar story, I guess you could say, because, like, we both met pretty much like the second day of law school.
Yeah, we're both kind of like caught eye contact. Like, we're pretty certain that we're the only two Spanish kids.
I mean, we looked in the room and it was like
our credit went up.
A room full of white people, like, right. It's like, oh, he got actually sneakers on. Okay, yeah, well, I could talk to this dude, So would you say that, like, going through this journey, right? And have you embraced being comfortable with being uncomfortable? Do you think it's still something you're learning? Is it like those moments of discomfort, right? Like, how, like, I'm trying to get to the point of, like, how has all of those experiences, has it changed you? Do you feel more comfortable going into a room, not knowing what you're going to walk into, like in this podcast, right? Even though we prepped, right? Like, how do you kind of get through that? What's the current feel of it, you know?
I'll use a very recent and I think important example of being uncomfortable with being comfortable with being uncomfortable. When I first ran for office, I would give these grand speeches that were scripted, that I would mess up, that I would get nervous for, but that I knew were important. The idea of running for office, all of that.
Yeah.
You use the techniques and what they teach you of, the Superman stand and and the practice and all of these things that I used. I used all of that. To this day, I still get nervous when I have to do something important that impacts people.
Right.
Last year, I passed possibly the biggest criminal justice reform bill in the history of New York in the last 10 years, which is Clean Slate. When Clean Slate came to me, and this is the bill for folks who are watching who don't know, that seals certain criminal records so that people can get a real second chance at life. If you've proven that you have yes, you committed a crime and you paid the dues to society and you went to prison and you now have been out of prison for X amount of time and you show that you are deserving of it, this bill will give you that chance. When the bill first came to me, I was like, there is no fucking way I can do this.
Yeah.
For a number of reasons. One, I'm a survivor of crime. I don't know that I could do it the justice that it needs and fight for it in the same way.
Wow.
Two, I'm not a criminal defense attorney. Am I going to know what the hell I'm doing?
Yeah.
And three, the political ramifications of doing it, oh my God, they were huge because everybody was, oh, she's pro-criminal and blah, 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 and everything that could, and I imagined everything. But then I thought, I met the people who would be impacted. I met their children and I was like, oh, I have to do this. But if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it my way. And my way is we're going to plan it out. We're going to talk about the pitfalls. And I was very frank with the folks who brought me the bill. And I said, here's how long it's going to take. And here's the pitfalls. They wanted me to pass it right away. I was like, guys, this is going to be a 2 to 3 year bill. And I want you to just be comfortable with that. They hated me because I told them all of the bad things that could happen.
Yeah.
And
That's your legal training.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I said,
lay it out.
Yeah, right.
I laid it out for them and I said, and here's the pitfalls. And here's who we're going to encounter who's going to be against us. But what that did was it helped us create a map of who are we going to go to get support. We ended up getting support from more than 200 organizations. And eventually, even the DA's offices were supportive of it. We met with the NYPD, who eventually said we don't have any concerns. So we created a kind of map that now other colleagues are following. And so when it came time for the debate, I was a wreck.
Yeah.
It was a 5-hour debate.
Yeah.
And I was like, what am I doing? I'm going to fail at this. But what all of the running for office and the going into law school and all of those things taught me is you over prepare. And I prepared for it like I was going to do a jury trial. Yeah. And we had binders and we had the case law and we had this and we had that. And it became, to this day, people are like, oh, I saw that debate. That was amazing. So what I do now with those experiences is help me prepare so that I am at the point of doing the actual thing comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
What do you think now, looking back at these things that you've done in the past and everything, all these feelings of discomfort that you've overcome, what have you learned about yourself at this point? That's a good one.
Really, do we get to be cocky about our work? I'm really fucking good at what I do.
There you go.
You.
Good.
We don't get to say that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And
Why
it's
not?
like,
It's great to say it.
right. We're taught in our culture that we have to be humble.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
that we have to be.
Put your head down.
Yeah,
Work hard.
Right.
And you have to go into the room and accept that the people who don't look like you are going to praise you. And it's like, yeah, there was a time for that, but I work really hard and I have an amazing team that works really hard. Robin is a beast when it comes to helping me write legislation and helping me prepare and pointing out what works, what doesn't work. you're really good at saying this, but don't say that. Prepare for this. And so I'm not just good at what I do, but I have a good team that helps me do it.
Yeah.
And it's okay to just,
Embrace that.
Brag a little bit.
Embrace all your
of course.
failures. And which is great, right? Because this is the main reason why we started this podcast, right? Because we wanted people to look at these failures, everything that you've gone through, and essentially say to yourself, you know what? I am fucking good at what I do. Absolutely.
And especially
100%.
like in our culture too, like you mentioned that, like we're taught to just be, I'm happy to be in the room. I'm just happy to be here. I'm happy to be here. I think we're past that point.
Yeah.
Like I've been happy to be in the room.
That's
for a
how we
while.
started
I'm
in
done
law
with
school.
it. Yeah.
We would always say that.
Right.
It was, I remember my first jury trial and going into the room where all the attorneys have to wait until they call us, to start picking our jury, and looking around and realizing that I was the only Latina.
Yep.
That there were maybe 2 or 3 other women. I think like 2 were white and 1 was a black woman.
Right.
That was it. Every other attorney was a white man. It's like, I'm here.
Right.
That's amazing.
Right.
But now it's like, I'm here.
Like I belong.
That's amazing.
Here, right?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Any feelings of uncomfortableness during that stage in your life when you were kind of going through that, where you were the only Latina in the room?
Oh, all the time. But I channel that a little bit different. I think back then, because we were always in fighting mode, fighting for your clients' rights, it made me a little bit extra, what's the word?
Zealous.
Zealous and more forceful in the things that I would do.
Right.
Yeah.
I remember a white attorney calling me spicy. And I went back in the courtroom and put it on the record.
That's PC now. That's PC.
That's PC now.
Yeah.
And I went back and put it on the record. And funny enough, I won that trial, and he offered me a job after. I was like, no.
Yeah, no.
No thanks, but I can give you one though.
Yeah. I'll get you a bottle of hot sauce. Yeah, whatever. So if you were looking back and kind of just rethinking and reliving all those moments, right? If there's somebody in the audience today that you want to leave some advice to, that you want to drop like some words of wisdom, some inspirational quotes, right? Something that could help them out, that's like help to guide you through this, right? What would that be?
Learn to trust your instinct. There's this, whether you call it your instinct, whether you call it divine intervention, whether you call it just a feeling that you have, learn to trust it. Along the way, I've had to learn by making mistakes, that if my instinct is telling me this is the direction and the politics are telling me that's the direction, trust your instinct, because at some point it's going to go back here. Yeah. It's the instinct that led me to say yes when I took that paid intern job at the Attorney General's office. It's the instinct that led me to say yes to when my friend Danny Drum asked me to run for office. Is the instinct that led me to hire the team that I have, the instinct that has led me to take the bills on that I have taken on, to turn down some bills. And it's the instinct that has led me to make decisions that are not always popular. And that's okay, because as long as I stay true to my instinct, to what I believe, I'm going to be able to sleep at night just fine.
Absolutely.
To my values. Yeah.
So when you were having that that conversation with your mom, right, about you're going to run, right? I know that you said no 4 times. Why did you say yes? Like, why did you finally say yes?
I learned to trust my political acumen. So the other people who had asked me were people that were involved with politics, but did not have power in politics. Danny Drum happened to be the council member from the particular district I was going to run in, and he still is. He's been out of office now 3 years, and he still is extremely popular. And I knew that if he was asking me, he was saying, I'm going to support you. I'm like, okay, we have a path now. Yeah. Because it's very different when someone who's, not to say a random, but someone who is not as powerful asks you to do it. Because you're like, okay, now I have to find the way. But when it's someone who can help deliver, it's like, okay, now we are going to find a way. Yeah. And so it makes a difference.
I kind of learned that in business now lately too, where it's like, I've been asked by a couple of people to do some of these shows, but when I look on the other side of the table, I'm like, I know that I'm going to be doing most of the work in this, and I don't really trust them anyway. So why would I do that? So I definitely agree with you on the instincts. I think it's something that I've learned a lot to kind of just trust through that. Yes.
That's your intuition.
Yeah, you're into it. And that's a very real thing. I don't think we discuss that enough as to like, how do you even identify that? Like, how are you able to do it? It's just something that's in your gut, man. You can't.
It's innate, man. It's literally a gut feeling. And it's like what Catalina said. If you are true to who you are and you trust your values and you know that you're doing things from your heart, you can't do any wrong.
Yeah.
You can't.
Being comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Being comfortable with being uncomfortable.
A little bit of our Latino brujeria. It's like
I'm gonna put in post-production like some smoke coming out of all that type of stuff. Awesome.
Well, what would you say? What would you say to your younger self now?
You're gonna be just fine.
There it is.
Growing up, in this part I didn't mention the reason why when I became a lawyer, I kind of leaned toward labor law.
Yeah.
Immigration naturally, but toward labor law was, I watched my mother have her wages stolen. I watched my mom struggle, be discriminated at work. And I was like, all right, I want to kind of help deal with that. Along the way, I watched my mom be almost evicted, experience domestic violence, like all of these things that I'm like, how am I going to make it out of here? How am I going to actually grow up and be someone? How am I going to survive? And I lived in survival mode for so long that, and actually took me a really long time once I got to thriving to settle into that I didn't know how I was going to be okay. And, what I would tell my younger self is trust your intuition. You're going to be just fine.
Trust your instincts.
Yeah.
Love it.
Wow.
Love it.
Wow. I'm like blown away by you. Clearly.
Yeah. Love it. Thank you so much. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Catalina.
Can we get a round of applause?
Yeah, seriously.
Remy, why aren't you clapping, Remy? Close us out, Carlos. Close us out.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Again, for Pablo Segarra, Catalina Cruz, Jamal Romero in the back, Remy on the ones and twos. I am Carlos Martinez. Remember, the point of the podcast is just to make sure that we change one person's life. And I think we've definitely done that today. I know for sure you've changed thousands of lives with everything that you do on an everyday basis. Yeah. I think you are literally the epitome of strength and a great representation of every dreamer out there, every immigrant out there that you're currently fighting for.
Thank you. I'm certainly hoping that I'm not the last, and it's why I like to tell my story.
Absolutely.
It's my responsibility to make sure. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. Love it.
And again, like what we always say, fuck it. At the end of the day, if it fails, it fails.